Look at the person next to you. What do you see? A face? Someone who needs to brush their teeth? Someone whose mom definitely still picks out their clothes in the morning. That's about all you can tell, though. People aren't like books. They don't come with little summaries about their life story, personality on the back, telling you what they believe, what they stand for, or how they act. You can't determine their orientation, personal history, or religious preference. Even if you could, what would it matter? So, knowing none of that, you have no grounds on which to judge that person. Except maybe they need to shower, brush their teeth better, maybe start dressing for themselves. So, why do humans give such priority to pigment? Why do we give religious preference and sexual orientation the power we give them to divide? Why are those things that have no value to the general public by themselves the cover stories of magazines and newspapers everywhere, on television and the internet? Take a minute and just think about it. In 2015 alone, there were 5,800 reported instances of hate crimes, and that number rose to 6,100 in 2016. The FBI estimates that 50% of these hate crimes were racially motivated. The other 50% is speculated to be motivated by either religious practices or sexual orientation. The FBI also estimates that roughly 60% of minorities will fall victim to a hate crime. The FBI has also identified 165 groups called general hate groups. I don't know exactly what a general hate group is, but I would imagine they're kind of like your teenager that generally hates everything. Oh my God, Mom, stop. Just on an adult child level. And they have the potential to cause real harm. Another 142 groups were classified as neo-Nazi. 115 groups were classified as white nationalist. And 113 groups were classified as black separatist groups. If you look at those numbers, there's a lot of division. So what's wrong? Slavery was abolished over 100 years ago. Civil rights were obtained in the 60s. And within the last 10 years, gay marriage was legalized. And the U.S. has always been built on the principles of freedom of religion and speech. So where did we go wrong as a nation? What are we missing? What is creating the divide that is getting speakers banned from college campuses, causing riots in Ferguson, Missouri, and drive a Colorado baker out of business because he refused to make a cake for a gay wedding he didn't personally approve of? The wake of all these advances in personal freedom have left America raw because the chains have been removed from groups who were once bound because they were different. Now these groups, black, Hispanic, homosexual, Muslim, Hindu, women, and the list can go on and on for every specialty group you could ever imagine. The new reality is that some people are a little shaken up and scared. On one end of the spectrum, you have your stereotypical, bald, overweight, wealthy, straight Christian white male who doesn't believe things should change. His kind was always on top. He doesn't really know why he's on top, but he fits the description, so success and power are solely for him and no one else. On the other end of that spectrum, You have someone who has been marginalized for generations, whether it be because of race, gender, orientation, or religion, who's getting their first taste of freedom and liberation for the first time, and they're hungry for more. They see the success of this stereotypical man on top, and they want it. They should want it, after all. America is all about bettering oneself. However, they neglect to see how he even got there. Even if he didn't work for it, someone put in the work for him, and now he gets to enjoy it. They focus too heavily on why he shouldn't have it instead of how they can have what he has. And that is where the blame game of reverting to history as an excuse arises. And that keeps America raw, because it plunges a knife back into a very open wound. The creation of white privilege is a prime example of this divisive mentality. While children born into a heterosexual white household statistically have a higher rate of success than children born into minority families, the story isn't true for all white children, so it's not fair to assume. Just as it's not fair to assume that someone who is black or Latino is a criminal of any sort. Just because there are statistics that support an idea doesn't make them true for everyone. And it's just as racist to assume the privilege of a white individual as it is to assume the criminal history of a minority. However, that's not what media outlets want you to believe, as their industry thrives on our unrest. Quote unquote hate crimes can cause ratings to skyrocket because the human nature is to stare directly at a train wreck while it's unfolding. And living in the era of smartphones and social media make that train wreck easier to watch and allow us to watch it more frequently. Rarely do we see more than one side, and often the side we see is the most gruesome and divisive. Naturally, these events and images play on the emotion of people. It's what the media wants. They want your reactions, because as long as you react, you will return to soothe your own emotions. Think about the case of Trayvon Martin or the riots in Missouri. How long did we hear about these stories? At what point did new information stop? How did these stories make you feel? How does it feel to hear about them again? See, the media will prey on these emotions, and they'll keep feeding us the same thing over and over again, hoping to give it, so that we hope for new information, but instead we get more of the same, so these same emotions compound. And the media preys on these extremes, just like Charlottesville, where a white nationalist drove through a crowd of counter-protesters, taking the lives of some and injuring others. America as a whole was shocked, and rightly so. However, see if you can recall how quickly the attention shifted from the details of the tragedy and those affected to the statement by President Donald Trump, where some felt he did not denounce the action of the white nationalist protesters. The answer is 24 hours. And from then on, every time the story aired, there was a reference to the controversial words of the president that were used to continue to perpetuate this controversy and tension. There was no time or place for that wound to heal either. And politicians, left or right, like to play on this media machine of fear-mongering, especially during disasters or a crisis. They use the media to pander to their voters, playing to the extreme of whatever end of the spectrum they feel will satisfy their constituents' emotions. fueled by their limited knowledge of the situation, taking shots across the aisle in an effort to elevate themselves in the face of tragedy, furthering the divide. When instead, what we need is to reach across the aisle and unify. If America continues on this path of fear, hatred, and search for reparations, we'll tear ourselves apart. And if we continue to limit our judgment to a surface level analysis, or even limit our definition of ourselves to a few characteristics, we will fall. While you can't change the heart or opinion of everyone, you can change your own. Stop letting media control your emotions. Get to know someone before you pass judgment. And even if you get to know them and there's something you don't particularly agree with, focus on the good in them, what they have to contribute, and don't define them by that one thing. Don't force your opinions and let people be. Always be ready to lend a hand. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we'll unify America.